time no chat. Today I thought I would hop on and share with you my birth story of my baby girl. She's finally here. She's 2.5 weeks old now, which is so sad to me. I feel like every day I wake up and look at her and she looks so different, and it makes me so sad because I really wish she could stay a little tiny baby forever. But it is really cool to get to see her grow and get to see, you know, her features come out more every single day. So I'm finally starting to get to a place where like I have, you know, little pockets of free time throughout my day. So right now she's just napping in her little bassinet over beside me. So while she naps, I thought I would just share with you my birth story. I'll start off by saying it was the best labor and delivery I could have honestly possibly asked for. I am a first-time mom. This is my first baby, and my labor in total was about 14 hours, which for a first-time mom, I hear that's actually pretty quick. So what had happened, she was born 40 weeks plus 2 days. So on 40 weeks plus 1 day, I had an OB appointment. And so I went to that appointment in the afternoon, and she checked me and she's like, nope, there's no change since last week. I was only 1 centimeter dilated. Like nothing was really happening yet. So I felt super discouraged, and I was like, oh my God, like I just don't want to be one of those women that goes like a week or like week and a half, almost 2 or even 2 weeks overdue. Especially because Avery was already measuring like a bit ahead. So at my 37 or 38 week appointment, she told me that she was already at like 7 pounds. So she said if you were to go to full term, you're looking at like a high 8s weight category for the baby. And I was like, I'm not a very big person. I'm like 5'3", 5'2.5", I don't know. I'm pretty small in stature. Like I was like, I cannot give birth to a baby that's like 9-10 pounds. Like don't want that. And the OB actually agreed with me. She was like, yeah, honestly, like if we can help that, like I don't want you to have to go through that either. So she did actually set me up to be induced. This was on a Tuesday, and she had set me up to go in and be induced starting on the Friday. So I at least felt better leaving the appointment knowing like, okay, at least like I have an induction set up this week. It's something for me to look forward to. And if I do happen to go into labor before that, that's amazing. But at least I do have this induction kind of like set up so that I'll have my baby by the end of the week at least. It actually kind of worked out that my husband had taken the day off that day to drive me to the appointment. And we actually got to spend the day together. Like we had breakfast together and we just like hung out. I actually got acupuncture done that day to help try to like induce my labor. And we also worked on the last like finishing touches on her room. So it was actually like a really nice day for us to spend together and kind of have some quality time before she arrived. Because around, I would say like in the evening, I started to feel a little different. I felt kind of crampy and like I just wasn't feeling myself. And I was like, like maybe this is my body kind of like preparing, right? But nothing serious. And then around, I would say like 10 p.m., the cramps started to get like a little more intense. And I was like, like it was then that I really started to like think like, okay, like maybe this is the start of something. But it wasn't until about midnight. So we went to bed. We went to bed at like 11:30. But I was kind of like, you know, just playing on my phone, just doing whatever. And by 12 o'clock, I would say is when I started true contractions. So I would lay there and they would start in the front and I could feel it. It's true what they say. It kind of feels like a big like mountain, almost like a peak. So I would start to feel the pain in the front, and then I could feel it like grow in intensity. And then when it hit that top, like really painful part, it would be all the way around my back. And it would stay there for a few seconds, and then it would slowly start to go back down, and then it would be done. And those started happening regularly. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, I'm having contractions. But I still wasn't convinced. I was like, honestly, I don't want to be that person that, you know, I don't want to gather up all of our things, wake up my husband, go drive to the hospital, only to have them check me and tell me that I'm, you know, only like still a centimeter and send me home. Like I just really did not want to do that, especially that late at night. So I was like, I'm making dang sure that these are the real thing and that it's time for us to go when we do go. So I got up out of bed after about an hour, honestly. And then that's when I started timing them. So I got the contractions app on my phone, and I would time each one when it would start and when it would end. And they were kind of sporadic at first. Like they'd be like, one would be 5 minutes apart, but then the next one might be 7 minutes apart. And then the next one would be like 6 minutes apart, and then it would be back to 5, but then it would be like 4 minutes. And it was just kind of all over the place for a good hour, till about like 2 a.m. I would say. I decided I was gonna call my mom, because she was like, I'm having my ringer on every single night, like call me if you know, if anything changes or if you're in labor or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, I'm probably in labor, so I'm gonna call her and just kind of like tell her what I'm feeling and see if this is the real deal. So I call her and she was like, oh yeah, like you're definitely in labor, you're having contractions. So she's like, I'll help you time them. And I just stayed on the phone with her until honestly like 3:30 in the morning, just going through these contractions. And honestly, by 3, they were definitely like less than 5 minutes apart each one. And even then I was still like, I don't know, like I was just so scared of like, I don't know, being sent home. But what I was experiencing was I would have one really big one, and then I would have maybe 30 seconds in between, and then I would have another like small one right after it. So that was what was like kind of fooling me up with the whole timing thing. And I was like, but they're still so sporadic, like they're not like technically like, you know, there's no like it's like one after another, and then like, you know, 4, 3, 2 minutes in between, and then like one after another again, you know, 4 minutes, one after another again, you know what I mean? But my mom was like, that's still a pattern, and it's still less than 5 minutes apart between like each one, so you need to go to the hospital and you need to wake Aiden up, my husband. And I was like, oh yeah. So I went upstairs and I woke him up at like 4 in the morning, and he was like, why didn't you wake me up before this? And I was like, I'm sorry, like I just really didn't want to wake you up unless I knew it was the real thing, because I didn't want you to like be tired and, you know, for work the next day or whatever. And he was actually like pretty mad at me that I didn't wake him up, and like I basically labored by myself for 4 hours. He just like could not believe it, but I was trying to be considerate. But I know looking back now, like I probably should have woke him up like as soon as I registered the fact that I was having contractions. But in the moment, I was just trying to do what I thought was best. So we get everything all packed up and we head to the hospital. And when I get there, we go in and they checked me. And the nurse was like, nope, you're definitely at like a 3 to 4 centimeters dilated. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, thank God. Because I didn't want to think that I was just being a baby. Like, I'm so glad that I'm actually in active labor. And she was like, oh yes, like, you definitely are. And she hooked me up to like the contraction, I guess like, monitoring machine. And she was like, you're definitely having them like less than 5 minutes apart. And, it looks like you're having, you know, like, some like overlapping or like double contractions. And I was like, yes, thank you. Like I thought that that's what I was experiencing, but I wasn't sure. And she was like, yeah. So anyway, she left me for a while. She's like, I want you to press this button every time we move. So I was like, okay. So I had to just lay in the bed and kind of just keep going through these contractions for, I would say, a good like half an hour. And during this whole time, Aiden has to be outside in the car because of the virus. He wasn't allowed in with me until I was like officially admitted. So I'm just kind of laying there going through these contractions. I want you to just walk around the hospital floors for a good like hour and a half before we admit you into your room. And I was just like, oh my God, okay. So I contacted Aiden. He came in, brought all our stuff in, and then there was this little like waiting room outside of the labor and delivery ward. So we kind of just dropped our stuff off in there, and then we just kind of did laps around the hospital floor. We just did laps back and forth and walking super slowly and having a contraction like every 2 minutes. I would have to just stop. I would go up against the wall like this, have my contraction, and Aiden would be really great about just like putting like counter pressure on my lower back and just like helping me through that. So we had to do that for an hour and 15 minutes is what we did. And then they came out and they were like, okay, like we can actually bring you in to get you set up in the room now. So I was like, perfect. So I went in again by myself. He just stayed in the little waiting room. And when I went in, another nurse came in and she started hooking me up with my IV. I was actually really nervous about that because I don't like needles whatsoever. But it actually like wasn't as bad as I thought. It definitely stung, but it wasn't as bad as I was building it up in my head to be. But then after that, the nurse came and she was like, okay, I'm gonna go get your husband for you. So she brought him in to our room, and then she walked me to our room. And as soon as we got in there, she was like, you're really lucky because, I had told them that I really wanted the epidural. So she was like, you're really lucky because we actually have the anesthesiologist coming up here. This was at like 8 o'clock in the morning, by the way. So this was about 4 hours later was when we finally got into our room. So she's like, we actually have an anesthesiologist coming up to do a C-section this morning. So maybe like right before he goes in there, like he can come up a little bit early and he can do yours right before he goes in for the C-section. And I was like, perfect. So by 8:30, I had my epidural put in. Aiden did have to leave the room for that, and I was by myself. And thankfully, I had a really, really nice nurse. She was, when I think about her, I honestly feel like I want to cry. Like, she was so sweet. And when he left, I was like, okay, like I am terrified of needles. I was like, I can't do this by myself. Like, can you please stay here with me? And can I hold your hand? And she was like, of course. So she put gloves on. And she's standing in front of me and I'm hunched over, and she puts out her fingers like this for me to like grip onto her fingers. And yeah, so with the epidural, like they're really great at, or at least my doctor was really great at, first explaining exactly what they're doing before they do it. So he's like, okay, like I'm gonna, just sanitize, like wipe your back. Then I'm just gonna put, the numbing needle. And that was actually the worst part of the epidural, was the numbing needle that they put in before the actual epidural. So that one, obviously, because you can like really feel it, it stings quite a bit. My back actually like involuntarily like jumped forward when they put it in, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I know I'm not supposed to move. And they're like, honestly, like you can't really help it, like your body just kind of does it. That's why they do this, because the epidural needle is obviously a lot bigger, so they don't want your body doing that with the epidural, because that's actually the really dangerous part. So yeah, and when they put the actual epidural in, it feels like kind of like staticky almost up your spine. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's a really weird, like almost like you're getting electrocuted almost. I don't know how to really explain it, but it's not painful. It just feels really, really like weird. But it was honestly, it was over within 10-15 minutes, like super quick process. And within, I would say 5-10 minutes, I was already starting to feel like way less pain. And then eventually it just like completely went away. And Aiden was like, oh my god, like this is the most amazing thing ever. Like you, like, the nurse was like, so did you just feel that contraction? And I'm like, no. And Aiden was like, that is so incredible that we have stuff like that to help you. So the nurse came in after my epidural and they checked me again, and I was at she said a 5.6, so I was probably like a 5.5. And yeah, basically I just laid there, just chilled. I took a few naps here and there. That went on for quite a while because the epidural did slow down my contractions. So I was stuck there for a while, for hours. I was stuck at that 5.6 point. And then they were saying that the baby Avery was sunny side up. So that was why I felt a lot of it in my back, because I was experiencing back labor. So they did want to try to get her to flip before pushing so that it would be a little easier on me. So periodically they would flip me on my side and they would put this huge blown up, they called it a peanut ball, kind of like in between my legs. And it's supposed to help like encourage the baby to flip. So they had to keep doing that from side to side. And it's the weirdest feeling ever because like my legs were dead. Like I couldn't move them whatsoever. So like Aiden and the nurse would have to like literally like pull my dead weight, like pull my legs up and like flip me over onto my side. And oh, it was so funny. But he was so amazing throughout the whole process. My husband, I cannot say enough good things about him. Like I already loved him so much before all of this, but that day right there will always be like such a memorable moment for me in just knowing like how much he really does love me. Because let me tell you, that is the most vulnerable time that anyone will ever see you. And the stuff that comes out of you, the way you let, like everything, like they see all of it, and he handled it with so much grace, and he was so compassionate and loving and supportive, and I could not be more grateful for him. But anyways, so they were starting to get a little concerned because Avery's heart rate was starting to drop through every contraction. And they also said like the reason why I was experiencing those double contractions was because she was sunny side up. So that's why I would have like one big one, then one small one like right after. So what they did was they then hooked me up to oxytocin. I can't remember exactly what time that was. But they did hook me up to oxytocin just to help get those contractions moving along and get me dilated more. So we did that for another few hours. And then finally, I woke up from a little cat nap and I was like, I'm starting to feel pain. Like I feel like the epidural is starting to wear off. She was like, okay. So she checked me again and she was like, yeah, she's like, you're at a 7 now. So, she's like, you're finally like at a 7. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. She's like, but if you're still feeling pain, like we'll top up your epidural. I can put some more medicine in through it. And I was like, that's awesome. Thank you. So because it took me so long to get from that 5-6 point to that 7, like hours, I don't think they expected me to dilate as fast as I did because they topped off my epidural and literally 5 minutes later, I was already at a 10 because I was like, okay, like I still feel like an intense amount of pressure right now. Like I feel like my whole like bottom half of me is going to like explode essentially. Like it was so much pressure. And oh, I forgot to mention that during that like, you know, all that time in between where like I was just stuck at that 5-6, my water did break on its own, which was the weirdest feeling ever. Like I was just laying there and it literally feels like you have like a water balloon inside you and somebody just takes a pin and pops it, because I felt the pop and then all the floodgates come out. So that was really cool that I got to experience that like naturally, I guess. But yeah, so going back to what I was saying, they checked me and they were like, yeah, you're at a 10. Like I can see the baby's head, you're ready to push. And I was like, holy shit, like this is happening. And so, because of the virus, my mom was not able to be in the delivery room with us like I had always thought she would be. She's just starting to wake up from her nap. We'll see if she settles or goes back to sleep or if I'm gonna need to go get her. So we had always planned we had an iPad and we planned to have her on FaceTime so that she could at least witness the birth of her first grandbaby. So I asked the nurse, I'm like, okay, like, am I allowed to like set up my mom, get Aiden to set my mom up on the thing? And she was like, well, like we kind of have to wait for the doctor to come in so that we can get like her approval. And I was just like, oh, okay. She's like, but I'm gonna have you start doing some practice pushes. And I was like, okay. So I was doing some practice pushes, things were going good. And then all of a sudden I felt a lot of pressure up really far up here, more so like in my lungs and in my ribs. And I was like, I'm having a really hard time breathing. Like I feel like every time I push, it's almost as if like her legs were pushing up on my lungs. And she was like, honestly, that's probably what it is. And she's like, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I was like, that's great. So with the pushing, I didn't feel it down below because I was so numb, because they had just topped up my epidural, which they're not supposed to do. You're supposed to actually be able to feel something so that you know where to push, but they didn't expect me to dilate as fast as I did, so she upped my dosage, and thankfully I was still able to push really well. They said that they were so shocked that I was a first-time mom. They're like, we swear, like, you could have done this like 2 or 3 times before this, like you just really know what you're doing. And I was like, that's great, because I can't really feel it, but I'm glad I know what I'm doing. So then I was like really starting to push. The doctor still wasn't in yet, and I was really struggling through the pushing. Honestly, I won't lie about that because of the whole breathing thing. My lips actually did turn blue at one point. I did throw up a couple times in the middle of pushing. And Aiden had to actually like come in and be like, okay, like, you need to give her a second, she needs to breathe, look at her lips, they're blue. And they finally like looked up and looked at me, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, like, take a second. So I was like, when I was done pushing, every single time I would literally be like like trying to breathe. Somebody got a little fussy, so I had to go grab her. But this is Avery James. This is my baby, my little girl. So yeah, I'm pushing, and finally the doctor comes in, and like the baby's like, it's like she's already like almost out, and I just look at the doctor. I'm like, can my mom please go on FaceTime? Like, can she see the baby be born? And she was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, Aiden, just do it. And he's like, okay. And he grabs the iPad. He like quickly like calls her on a thing, sets it up. He's like, okay, go, go, go. And literally like within like 3 seconds of her answering the call, she slips out, like, and she just comes up, and I look down, and they're like, okay, like, you can grab her. And I help like reach down and like pull her up onto my chest. And it was honestly the most magical moment. I'll always remember that feeling of like looking down and seeing her and being like, I think my first words were, is that my baby? Which Aiden made fun of me after. He's like, who else's baby would it be? But it's just like, it's such a surreal thing. Like, oh my God, that's really her. Like, that's my baby. Like, you dream of them for, you know, your whole pregnancy, and then they're here. She was a whopping 8.8 pounds, 21.5 inches long. So she's a long and thick little girl, but it's awesome. I'm happy that she was like so healthy. I can't believe that I got a baby this big out of me. And I only did 25 minutes of pushing, which is apparently really good. Again, for like a first time mom, like sometimes people are pushing for an hour, 2 hours or more. So yeah, I think it really helped that she was already really, really low before I even like went into labor. So I think that really helped that she was already like, she's already set up for me, you know, she's already ready to go. I was thankful my mom did get to see that moment of her like entering the world, and those first few moments, it was really special. We stayed in the hospital, so she was born, at 2 p.m., 1:56 p.m. And we stayed in the hospital that whole day and that night, and then we got to go home the next day around like 4. So it was like 24 hours, a little more, 26 hours that we were in the hospital. Sorry, we had to stop and have a little mid-afternoon snack. She needed to eat. So I am breastfeeding, so I will say those first few days postpartum were rough with the breastfeeding, being in the hospital that first night, trying to get the hang of feeding. It is just as hard as they say. But I am really glad that I, you know, continued to push through no matter how hard it was, just because it did get easier every single day, and we finally have the hang of it now, and it's just really nice knowing she's actually being fed and she's actually eating well. She is gaining weight, so she's back up to her birth weight at 2.5 weeks, which is awesome. Tear internally, so yeah, I could barely walk. Again, with like the no sleep, being in pain, you know, trying to get the hang of the breastfeeding, all of that stuff. It was the hardest experience of my life, I would say, but also the best at the same time. Thankfully, Aiden did have that week off because he was amazing at being, you know, helpful, supportive during that week, taking care of me, honestly. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about my birth experience. Everything just went so well, and I'm so grateful and blessed because I know that this is not everybody's experience. It's not that it wasn't not painful, because it really was. It was rough, but as far as, how well it could have gone, it definitely went, the best it could have, like nothing, no complications really, like, she's healthy, I'm healthy. So I'm just very, very grateful and blessed for that. And I hope that we're continuing to be blessed throughout this journey, because it's a learning curve every single day. There's something new, and every day, we learn a little more and we get to know each other a little better. And I'm just over the moon ecstatic to be a mom, honestly. As hard as it is, I love every second. But I am going to do like a postpartum kind of essentials, things that I really used and that really, really helped me out. And I'm also going to do a newborn essentials video probably in another couple weeks, just so I can really I already do have a really good grasp on the things that have been lifesavers for me since she has been home, but I'll wait another couple weeks and do like kind of like a 1 month update and add in all of the things that I'm really loving for her as a newborn. As far as my hospital bag goes, I used pretty much everything that I brought. I would say the only thing that I didn't use was my makeup. I didn't wear any makeup. All the outfits that I brought her, I wore on her. She did have like a little bit of a bout of like throwing up amniotic fluid that she had swallowed on her way out, so she did ruin a lot of her clothes. So I was happy that I brought a lot of outfits for her, and like all the burp cloths, everything like that. But yeah, as far as like everything else that I brought, like all the clothes, the snacks, pillows, blankets, like even down to like the robe that I brought, like everything that I brought, I used. So you look back at my what's in my hospital bag video and you look at all the things that I packed, I used pretty much everything in there. Oh, I also didn't use the shower products. So because I was only there for one night, I didn't shower. I just waited till I got home. But I'm so happy I brought them just in case I had wanted to shower, or if I had to be there for longer, because I definitely would have if I had to, stay another night or something like that. But yeah, everything else I used, so I was pretty happy about that. But anyways, that is my birth story. I know it's probably kind of all over the place, and I don't really have exact timestamps besides like, when I went into labor, like when we went to the hospital, when I got my epidural, and when she was born. Everything else is pretty much a blur. But yeah, 14 hours total of labor, and we have this beautiful little angel, Avery James. And yeah, I'm so happy that she's finally here. So like I said, stay tuned for the next few videos that I have coming up, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye guys.